Disclaimer: all acts and processes presented in this video are for roleplay purposes only. Please consult a professional equestrian before working with any equines. Thank you, and please stay safe, guys. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have something very special planned since recently I've been digging through some old photos, videotapes, and advertisements in search of Marble's complete story.
I've been told I should go find myself again. You're taking my soul, everything I own, poison in my head.
Before the video begins, I actually want to give a quick shout out to Genevieve Emerald Valley, since she was actually able to correctly guess what this week's video was going to be about. I posted in my community tab a sneak peek photo and told you guys to try and guess what this week's video would be, and Genevieve was able to do that, so great job, Genevieve. Anyway, we can get right into the video now. Since so many of you really seem to love my old mare Marble, who recently passed away while birthing my newest full legend back in August, I decided to do some investigating and figure out Marble's full story. If you've seen my first few videos that I made, you'd know that I didn't actually purchase Marble until she was almost 8 years old. However, I did know her first owner as she belonged to a barn up in the absolutely gorgeous Fir Grove, where she was born and raised. Before we get any further, let's start from the very beginning. Marble was born to a very sweet Arabian mare named Honey. The barn owner described Honey as a motherly mare who was always looking out for her foal and her rider. Despite this, Marble right off the bat took after her father and was pretty fiery and difficult to handle. She was halter broke pretty quickly, but otherwise she was just a bundle of energy looking to burn it by galloping for hours and hours. The majority of her life as a filly involved some groundwork training and such, but no real undersaddle breaking, so she was an interesting case when she was older. Skipping ahead a bit, when she was a 3-year-old, she was still that fiery soul that had a ton of energy, and as a result, they figured speed events were her specialty. However, she was a little too short to be a good jumper, not to mention she didn't have the love and passion for cross country, so it wasn't a good fit. So instead, they shifted to Western riding, specifically Gymkhana, and immediately something just clicked in her mind, and she just found a way to use her speed for something she actually enjoyed. Marble never really had a full owner. It was mainly the barn that had simply bred her, and she became just a fun mare for the barn and for the lesson students or boarders who wanted to just have a quick ride. So Marble never really had a purpose for the longest time as her potential withered away inside the barn. That is, until a little girl with a love for horses finally convinced her parents to give her a forever home. As you might have guessed, the little girl was me. When Marble was almost 8 years old, my parents realized that I was moving upward in my career as a young rider, and I decided it was finally time for me to have a horse to call my own. Now, I am aware that Marble was not the greatest choice for a younger intermediate rider. While she was now comfortable being ridden and under saddle, she still had that green personality and mindset. But I couldn't help myself. I had fallen in love with her from the start. It's hard to describe the feeling you get when you find that horse that makes you feel alive and relates to you, but I do hope you feel it someday because it's amazing. My very first test ride on Marble was actually pretty good if I remember correctly. I had an instructor in the ring, and you can't see her in the video, but I just remember her telling me to tighten my grip on the reins, otherwise Marble was going to take off with me. That was not exactly the best thing to tell an 11-year-old. Oh, and here's me waving at my mom who was filming this. Regardless, I still was convinced Marble was the horse for me, so after what felt like forever, I finally convinced my parents to let me bring Marble back to the barn. Right off the bat, I was obsessed with her, and it took her a week to finally be relaxed in the new environment, but she never lost her personality. Marble was not only my first horse, but she was also the first horse to bolt and buck me off. I still remember the day vividly, and even though my mom didn't catch it on video, she did get a picture of the aftermath with me sitting on my butt in the dirt, and Marble rather proud of her accomplishment. In the moment, I was terrified, but any equestrian out there knows that you haven't actually become a horse rider until you've been bucked off. And while it's not fun, you always just get back up and get back on every time. Unwilling to give up on Marble, I continued to work with her and ride her, teaching her who was boss. Since Marble never really had been ridden or had an alpha, she wasn't used to all this attention and having to submit her position in the pecking order. After several fails, falls, and losses, I still remember the day when we were in the round pin and eventually, finally, everything fell into place. Everything clicked, and Marble finally realized that I was her girl. As cliche or cringy as it sounds, it is the best feeling when you're in the round pin and your horse walks up to you completing the bond. My dad calls it joining up, and I was so happy when she finally did it. It was also at that moment that I knew I was never going to sell her. She was going to live the rest of her life here at Starshine, where I knew she would be happy and healthy. It was one of those moments where the camera kind of circles around you dramatically. Those moments. From there on, we made good progress, and we went to our first Gymkhana event when I was 13. While we didn't win the first show, I won my second show in the 2D Junior division. After that, I rode mainly Western, specifically barrel racing, since it was Marble's best event and honestly one of my favorite events to ride in. As time wore on, Marble and I grew closer, continuing to compete and do well in Gymkhana. At this point, Marble would always be my heart horse and always be that mare that started it all for me. However, she simply wasn't fast enough to take me any higher at shows, so if you've seen my writing story video, then you'd know that it was around this time that I actually bought a new mare named Gamora, who was able to take me further. But this video isn't called Gamora's story, it's called Marble's story, so get out of here, Gamora, this isn't about you. Even though I now had two horses that I had to look after, I refused to sell Marble since there was no way I could see anyone else treat her the way I did, and I didn't think she would be happy anywhere else. And while I was busy with school and rodeos, I promised myself that I wouldn't let Marble be neglected, so I still tried to ride her as much as possible. Whether that meant just a nice trail ride, a short practice in the arena, or working in the round pin, I wanted to make sure Marble would get the exercise she needed so she wouldn't be all fiery again with energy. Skipping ahead some more, this brings us to the recent events where Marble became a broodmare. And while I didn't breed her as much as Gamora, she was still an amazing mother. I now understand where she got her motherly skills and habits now that I knew who Honey was. And that pretty much brings us up to date. It's still pretty hard for me to talk about this since Marble was such a huge part of my writing career and my life in general. She was there for me for 11 years. 11. That's a long time. She literally carried me through the first few hiccups of becoming a barrel racer, and I really wish I just had one more chance to thank her for everything she's done. I am aware that she was a horse, not a human, but the bond and friendship a rider can form with a horse is the most out-of-world experience. If you've never ridden a horse and you don't understand why we're so obsessed with our horses, well, you're just gonna have to experience that for yourself to fully understand. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little tribute to Marble. She lived a good life, and while she left too soon, I still want her to be remembered, and I hope she means as much to you guys as she does to me. Leave a like and comment if you love Marble, and hit that subscribe button. Also, a quick note, I recently have been posting on Pinterest, so if you want a cool sneak peek photos, then there's a link to that in the description. And with that, see you in the next video.
We've been talking for an hour, we just can't find the end. We won't understand each other. I wonder how it feels to fall asleep.